So, Ma'adim Simchat, everybody. We will be learning today the Haftarah that we read on Simchat Torah in Israel. And before I even started, I will say that it's a very surprising Haftarah because you know that actually there's a list of some of the Haftarot in the Talmud, Masechet Megillah. The Gemara tells us about, especially about the holidays, which Haftarah you should be reading. And when it reaches Shmini Atzeret, the last day of Sukkot, the Gemara says you should read a chapter from Sefer Melachim describing the inauguration of Bet HaMikdash in the times of HaMelech Shlomo. In Eretz Yisrael, we don't do that. I think in Chutz La'aretz, you have 2 days Yontif, so on the first day Yontif, you do this, and the second day you do what we do. But the reason for that is that after the end of the Gemara days, a minhag was established in Bavel to read the parsha every week the way we do now, with a cycle ending on what we call Simchat Torah. This is a custom from the times of the Geonim. In Eretz Yisrael, at the time of the Talmud, they had a 3-year cycle of reading the Torah, and therefore ending the entire Chumash once every 3 years, not once every 1 year. In Bavel, they changed that custom, and they switched the minhag to having what we have, Parashat HaShavua, which are 52 parashot or 50 somewhat parashot, and ending with Simchat Torah as the culmination and finishing of the entire Torah. Once that happened, then on the second day of Simchat Torah, or the second day of Shmini Atzeret in Chutz La'aretz in Bavel, they dedicated the day to Simchat Torah. And once they had that dedication, the Geonim said, why don't we read also the first chapter of Sefer Yoshua? And very, very clear why. Moshe passes away, Yoshua becomes a new leader, and let's read the beginning of the book of Yoshua as Haftarah of the day of Simchat Torah. That happened in Bavel. Hard to know if it immediately filtered into Eretz Yisrael. The earliest time we hear about it coming into Eretz Yisrael is no sooner than the 16th century, when they established the what we call today the 4 holy cities of Tiberias, Tzfat, Yerushalayim, and Hebron. The very Kabbalistic environment took the idea of Simchat Torah and brought it to Eretz Yisrael, and merged it with the 1 day of Shmini Atzeret that we have. And Shmini Atzeret kind of took on another nature than the original just festival of ending of Sukkot, and it became Simchat Torah. And with it, the Haftarah changed. And from then on, in Eretz Yisrael, we only read the one Haftarah, which we're going to read today, and the Haftarah, the first chapter of Sefer Yoshua. So let me read the Haftarah first. It's not very long. It's about 18 psukim. And then we can start our conversation. As always, I'll read the Hebrew. You can peek in the English, which will be on the left. Vayi acharei mot Moshe eved Adonai. After Moshe Rabbeinu passes away, the very last psukim of the Torah, Vayomer Adonai Yoshua bin Nun mesharet Moshe lemor. God speaks to Yoshua, the servant of Moshe. משה עבדי מת, ואתה קום עבור את הירדן הזה, אתה וכל העם הזה אל הארץ אשר אנוכי נותן להם לבני ישראל. Moshe passed away. Now you come and you cross over the Jordan River with the entire nation, bring them to the land that I am giving the people of Israel. כל מקום אשר תדרוך כף רגליכם בו, לכם נתתיו, כאשר דיברתי אל משה. Any place where my foot will, your feet will tread, I will give you like I promised משה. מהמדבר והלבנון הזה, ועד הנהר הגדול, נהר פרת, אל ארץ החיתים ועד הים הגדול, בבוא השמש יהיה גבולכם. From the desert in the south to the Lebanon in the north, from the east to the west, I will give you this entire land. Will be your border. חזק ואמץ, כי אתה תנחיל את העם הזה, את הארץ אשר נשבעתי לאבותם לתת להם. Be strong and resolute, and you will conquer, you will bring this land, people of the land into this land like I promised their forefathers. רק חזק ואמץ, be very strong. לשמור לעשות ככל התורה אשר ציווך משה עבדי, אל תסור ממנו ימין ושמאל, למען תשכיל בכל אשר תלך. Be very strong and resilient, and observe faithfully the teachings that I've taught Moshe, my servant. Do not deviate to the right or to the left, so that you may be successful in every path that you go. לא ימוש ספר התורה הזה מפיך, והגית בו יומם ולילה, למען תשמור לעשות ככל הכתוב בו, כי אז תצליח את דרכך ואז תשכיל. Let not this book of teaching be ceased from your lips. You should study it, recite it day and night, so you can keep all the rules and regulations within it, and then you will be successful. Then you will be in all your undertakings. הלא ציוויתיך, חזק ואמץ, אל תערוץ ואל תחת, כי עמך אדוני אלוהיך בכל אשר תלך. I charge you, be strong and resilient. Do not be terrified or dismayed, for the eternal, for Hashem, will be with you wherever you go. 9 psukim of God speaking to Yoshua, and now Yoshua speaks to the people. Vayitzav Yoshua et shotrei ha'am lemor, he speaks to the officials of the people. עברו בקרב המחנה, וצוו את העם לאמור, הכינו לכם צידה, כי בעוד 3 ימים אתם עוברים את הירדן הזה, לבוא לרשת את הארץ, אשר אדוני אלוהיכם נותן לכם לרשתה. Prepare yourself, within 3 days we're going to be crossing over into the land of Israel. And then he turns to another group, לראובני ולגדי, ולחצי שבט המנשה, אמר יהושע לאמור. He turns to Reuven, Gad, and half of the tribe of Menashe. Whoever remembers, we know at the end of Sefer Bamidbar, there's a conversation between them and Moshe Rabbeinu where they request to stay on the eastern side of the Jordan River, and Moshe strikes a deal with them. If you'll come and conquer the western side, I will give you the eastern side. And so Yoshua turns to them and says, Zachor, remember, et hadavar asher tziva etchem Moshe eved Adonai lemor. Adonai Elohechem maniach lachem v'natan lachem et haaretz hazot. God will be granting you a haven and assigning this territory for you. For the meantime, neshechem v'tapechem umiknechem, your wives, your children, and your livestock, yeshvu ba'aretz asher natan lachem Moshe be'ever hayarden. They will remain on the eastern side of the Jordan. Ve'atem ta'avru chamushim lifnei achechem kol giborei ha'chayil va'azartem otam. But you, as warriors, you should go as across the river with the people of Israel and help them conquer the land. For how long? Ad asher yaniach Adonai Elohechem kachem וירשו גם המה את הארץ אשר אדוני אלוהיכם נותן לכם, ושבתם לארץ ירושתכם, וירשתם אותה, כאשר נתן לכם משה עבד אדוני בעבר הירדן מזרח השמש. Once you finish doing that, you can return to your land and conquer it as well and live there like Moshe gave you. End of Yoshua's conversation. ויענו את יהושע לאמור, they answer him, כל אשר ציוויתנו נעשה, ואת כל אשר תשלחנו נלך, whatever you commanded us we will do, wherever you tell us to go, we will go, ככל אשר שמענו את משה, כן נשמע אליך. Just like we obeyed Moshe, we'll obey you. רק יהיה אדוני אלוהיך עמך, imach kasher haya im Moshe. As long as God will be with you, like he was with Moshe. Kol ish asher yamre et picha, velo yishma et devarecha, lechol asher tetzavenu yumat, rak chazak ve'ematz. Anyone who flouts your commands and does not obey them will be put to death, as long as you be strong and resolute. That's our chapter 18, very short psukim. And as I said, it's pretty self-evident why we're reading this. We're finishing the Torah. We hear about Moshe Rabbeinu passing away, and the very next pasuk is God turning to Yoshua, the successor of Moshe, So it's not a very big surprise that we're reading this chapter. However, I want to speak about three different aspects of this transition in power. First point I want to raise, which has very little to do with our chapter, but has a lot to do with the larger picture. In general, the Torah ending where it ends is a very surprising aspect. Like, I'm assuming if I would ask anyone, what is the Torah about? So many people will say it's a book of law. And then a whole other group of people will say, it's not only a book of law, it's also a book of history. It's a book of the Jewish history. The book starting with the creation of the world, but putting a limelight on the chosen people, which are the people of Israel. We have in Sefer Bereshit the focus becoming smaller and smaller from the entire world to the offspring of Abraham, and then Yitzchak, and then Yaakov. End of Sefer Bereshit, leading the offspring of Yaakov to Egypt. And pretty much the narrative of the rest of the story of the Torah is taking them out of Egypt and bringing them to the land of Israel as promised in the covenant to the forefathers Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov. So although the Torah is a book of laws, it's also a book of history, but the book of history is the history of I won't say the Jewish people, the Israelites, going down to Egypt and emerging from Egypt, which is why the place where the Torah ended is so surprising. It doesn't end with them coming into Eretz Israel like one would expect. The story should be they were brought down to Egypt and returned to Eretz Israel. That's the story. But the story becomes they went down to Egypt. God places the responsibility of bringing them out of Egypt on Moshe. Moshe leads them for 40 years. He brings them to the brink of Eretz Israel. They're almost in Eretz Israel. They're on the other side of the Jordan. Moshe dies because of his sin, and he's not allowed to come into Eretz Israel. And the story ends. Now, once the Torah ends with the death of Moshe, it almost seems like it's a story about Moshe. The hero of our story died, and the book ends. But why is Moshe the hero of the story? Moshe is the go-between between God and the people of Israel, the protector of Am Yisrael, the one who brings down the Torah, but he's not the hero of the story. And it's almost as if the Torah forces us to ask, is he? Perhaps he is, because the Torah ended. And in fact, the Nevi'im call the 5 books of Moses exactly that. Shim'u Torat Moshe. The Torat Moshe. If somebody was, a couple of weeks ago, I gave a class in this setting about Avodah B'Natan, and we spoke about that very question, is about the Mishnah and Avot. Moshe Kibel Torah Misinai Musara Yoshua, and I raised the question of, really, Moshe Kibel Torah Misinai? Everybody got Torah Misinai, not just Moshe. Why are we focusing on Moshe? But indeed, the Torah, by choosing to end with the death of Moshe, is in a sense telling us that's the end of the story. So I find it very hard to swallow saying it became a story of one person. To me, it's more palatable to say that a very serious section of the story ended with Moshe because something is going to change. Now, we all feel this, and anybody opening up the Tanakh feels it. There's Torah, and there's Nevi'im. Or anybody reciting the 13 pillars of faith that the Rambam compiled, there's a belief in the prophecy, and a belief that God speaks to man, but there's also a belief in the prophecy of Moshe. The prophecy of Moshe is different and distinct from all other prophecies. And in a sense, the Torah, when it ends its book, when the death of Moshe, it's telling us the transition between Moshe and Yoshua isn't a simple one. Don't just gloss over quickly. Once Moshe is no longer the leader, something dramatic happened. There's a real change. And the Torah doesn't spell it out. The Torah doesn't tell us exactly what is the change. But again, the mere fact that it ended the 5 books of Moses and going into Eretz Yisrael is part of a new book already indicates that. But we also feel the difference in a level between Torah and Nevi'im. And although Nevi'im are also speaking to God and giving us God's words, they're telling us a very distinct story, very distinct message. A third aspect is, once we get into the world of Nevi'im, we no longer have the law. We no longer have an intertwining between halacha and nevuah. What we have is two separate distinct books. We have books of halacha, Torah Sheba'al Peh, and we have books of prophecy, and the twine do not meet. And the Torah being a very unique type of book that intertwines prophecy, ideas, history with law. Once the Torah ended, that genre ended. And we now have books of prophecies and we have books of law. Torah Sheba'al Peh, let's say, we have Nevi'im, and in the books of Nevi'im, we do not hear of law. And so in many ways, the Torah makes a distinction between the books of Moshe and the books of the prophets. And it's not just that Moshe died, an era has changed. A relationship with God has evolved or became higher or lower. We have to ascertain. But you cannot speak about Yehoshua in the same terminology of Moshe. So what I want to do for the next couple of minutes is really ask the question of, let's try to understand how Yoshua is presented to us in lieu of Moshe. Moshe died. We're getting Yehoshua as the next leader. What are the psukim telling us about this change? And I'll start with going back to the chapter that I just read, the 18 psukim. I don't know if you noticed, but if you didn't, I'll highlight it now. The person most spoken about in this chapter is Moshe. There are 18 psukim in the book of Yoshua, but and Moshe Rabbeinu is mentioned in them 10 times. Already in the fourth word of the book is Vayi Achrei Mot Moshe. Eved Adonai, Vayomer Adonai Yoshua bin Nun, Mesharet Moshe. Moshe Avdi Met. In the first 3 sentences, Moshe is already mentioned 3 times. Clearly giving us a very, very strong emphasis. Moshe is here in the background. Moshe didn't disappear. Moshe is very, very noticeable, although we're talking to Yoshua. But it's not just that, and I want to go back a little bit and ask the question of how was Yoshua chosen? Or let me rephrase the question, not how he was chosen, but are we surprised by this choice? And I brought at the end of the document quite a few psukim that from the Torah that describe Yehoshua. Each clump is A, B, C, etc., is numbered. And the first one is the Sefer Shmot, Exodus chapter 24. I'll just read it. Vayomer Adonai el Moshe, Ale elai ahara, ve'yeh sham, ve'etna lecha et luchot ha'even, ha'torah v'ha'mitzvah asher katavti lehorotam. Vayakom Moshe ve'Yoshua mesharto, vayal Moshe el har Elohim. These psukim are psukim that are before the receiving of the tablets, of the Luchot HaBrit. God promises Moshe, you should come up to the mountains and I'll give you these tablets. So notice in Pasuk Yud Bet, who's God turning to? Vayomer Adonai el Moshe. Ale elai, Hara, come up to the mountain to me. Be there, and I will give it to you. Pasuk Yud Gimel, who actually gets up to go? Vayako Moshe, v'Yeshua Misharto. Two people react to this command. Two people get up to start going up. Moshe, v'Yoshua Misharto. But then in actual fact, who goes up? Vayal Moshe, l'har Elohim. So God tells Moshe, come up. Indeed, Moshe comes up, but yet we hear about Yoshua. But did Yeshua go up? If so, why is he going up? He's not Moshe. He wasn't commanded to go up. Yoshua is described here, and here's the interesting translation. The word Mesharet, Yoshua Mesharto. So in the JPS translation, it's his minister. In the translation I brought before, it was its attendant. It likely means a type of servant, a manservant, the person who doesn't leave his side. So Moshe is commanded to go, but Moshe never walks alone. Moshe has his manservant going with him. But Yoshua is an independent personality here. It's not like you have Moshe and Aaron, Moshe being the prophet and Aaron being the Kohen. They don't have different roles. There's Moshe, and wherever Moshe goes, you turn your head and Yoshua is there. But Yoshua isn't an independent person. And it appears again later on in the chapter Lamed Gimel, which we almost read yesterday, but just right after. ודיבר אדוני אל משה פנים אל פנים, כאשר ידבר איש אל רעהו. ושב אל המחנה, ומשרתו יהושע בן נון לא ימוש בתוך האוהל. Here we have a pasuk describing when Moshe left the Am Israel. He was very disappointed, and he took his tent and left the people. When he's out of the people's midst, and he has his own tent struck up there, so God appears to Moshe, and look at this beautiful description. V'diber Adonai el Moshe panim el panim. The Lord spoke to Moshe face to face, like a man speaks to his peer, his friend. But you know, the pasuk tells us there's another person there. Yoshua bin Nun nar lo yamish b'toch ha'oel. Yoshua is also in that tent. So it's not really a meeting of two old friends, God and Moshe. There's Yoshua. But no one notices Yoshua. Yoshua is the annex to Moshe. The meeting point is between God and Moshe. There's also Yoshua there. But he is not the center point at all. And time and again, Yoshua is referred to as a sidekick of Moshe, of the person. You have the Batman and the Robin. You have the sidekick, but Yoshua is the sidekick. At times, the sidekick can do things that the main character can't, like he can fight the war against Amalek. But he's fighting Moshe's war. It's not Yoshua. Yoshua is not perceived as an independent personality. In fact, to the extent that when Yoshua hears that other people are prophesying, he runs to protect, and that's in section C, he runs to protect Moshe's honor. And Moshe tells him, relax, it's okay, I'm not threatened. Yoshua is Moshe's protector, Moshe's servant, Moshe's aide, Moshe's attendant. He is not a persona. In fact, if I look in Sefer Dvarim, Sefer Bamidbar, is perhaps almost the most clear evidence of that. Moshe Rabbeinu in Sefer Bamidbar realizes towards the end of the book, his days are becoming numbered, and he turns to God and says, I need a replacement. I'm reading in section D, Sefer Bamidbar, chapter 27. וידבר משה אל אדוני לאמור, יפקוד אדוני אלוהי הרוחות לכל בשר, איש על העדה. אשר יצא לפניהם, אשר יבוא לפניהם, אשר יוציאם, אשר יביאם, ולא תהיה עדת אדוני כצאן אשר אין להם רועה. Please, God, set a man over the congregation. We need a leader. I'm going to not be here forever. We need a replacement. And the replacement needs to be a person who can lead the people, go in front of them, come in front of them. And they should not be like a flock without a shepherd. ויאמר אדוני אל משה, קח לך את יהושע בן נון, איש אשר רוח בו, ושמחת את ידך עליו. God says, I have a great idea. Why don't you take Yoshua? Now note that Moshe didn't suggest that himself. He didn't turn to God and say, why don't we name Yoshua as my successor? Name someone, as if, like, I have no ideas. And God comes with a great idea. Take Yoshua. But even now, notice, ויאמר אדוני אל משה, קח לך את יהושע בן נון, איש אשר רוח בו, take a man who has spirit, but then now listen to two things. A, lay thy hand upon him, ושמחת את ידך עליו, והעמדת אותו לפני אלעזר הכהן, ולפני כל העדה, וציווית אותו לעיניהם. ונתת מהודך עליו, למען ישמעו כל עדת בני ישראל. A, you need to put your hands on his head, and as the pasuk said in 29, you shall put thy honor upon him. You, Moshe Rabbeinu, need to instill him with your power. Now, in a sense, that is saying, well, we're having a leader, but this leader is not a new leader. It's Moshe. Moshe died. You're right. But Moshe's spirit lives on. Moshe manages to, or God tells Moshe, I am allowing you a way of keeping your spirit alive. I'm giving you a way of continuing your derech, of having an influence way after you're no longer in this world, through Yoshua. But Yoshua is the medium of what's happening. He is not a new leader. He is a replica of Moshe. And to a limit, Pasuk Kaf Aleph, ולפני אלעזר הכהן יעמוד, ושאלו למשפט ההורים, לפני אדוני, על פיו יצאו ועל פיו יבואו, הוא וכל בני ישראל איתו וכל העדה. And Yoshua needs to stand in front of Elazar and ask Elazar what God says. So unlike Moshe, who had direct relationship with God, and he, like we read before, he's like God's friend. They can just talk. If Yoshua wants to hear from Moshe, he needs to go through Elazar. He doesn't have direct access. So is Yoshua the replacement of Moshe? Yes, God chooses him. However, with the choice of God, of Yoshua, we need to realize that the psukim themselves tell us a very strong limitation. He is really Moshe B. He is not Yoshua. He is Moshe B. He has his spirit. He has limited access. He is not managing, or at least what we hear here in Sefer Bamidbar, we hear that Yoshua being chosen is being chosen as a continuation of Moshe. And I'm bringing this back to the first chapter in Yoshua that we read. And I'm saying that when the second we read this, we already kind of get a sense that Yoshua, like I mentioned before, we have the Torah and we suddenly have a very big drop. And the drop became Sefer Nevi. And the drop isn't just because what I mentioned before, Torah is a high level, directly is God. The leadership has a drop. And Yoshua is the servant of Moshe. He is not Moshe. He's not a new leader. He's not a replacement of Moshe. He is the servant of Moshe, who has a leadership role in lieu of Moshe, but he is taking over for Moshe in a sense. And I want to show you quite a few psukim that give that sense in the chapter that we read. Going back to the very first pasuk of the chapter, ויהי אחרי מות משה עבד אדוני, ויאמר אדוני אל יהושע בן נון משרת משה לאמור, משה עבדי מת, ואתה קום עבור את הירדן הזה, אתה וכל העם הזה אל הארץ אשר אנוכי אתן להם לבני ישראל. God stressing to Yoshua, you are going in because Moshe Avdi met. There's no stronger slap in the face of saying, tough, mani aseh, enet Moshe. Okay, you go in. Ata, kum avot ha'erden hazeh, ata v'chol ha'am hazeh. And not only is it that way described, it's also not even telling him, you lead the way. So all of Am Yisrael need to go across. You're part of Am Yisrael. You and them go across together. Because I, God, am giving them the land. It's almost a description of a lack of leadership. Pasuk Gimel, Kol makom asher tidroch kaf baraglechem bo, lachem netativ. Why? Kasher dibarti el Moshe. God is stressing again, I am giving it to you because that is what I promised Moshe. And the opening statements here are I don't want to use the word insulting, but they're insulting. They're looking at Yoshua and saying, we really are second best. I'm sorry, but you are. But however, and not only God is saying that, but also the people of Israel are saying that to Yoshua as well. Look in Pasuk 16. ויענו את יהושע לאמור, כל אשר ציוויתנו נעשה, את כל אשר שלחנו נלך, ככל אשר שמענו אל משה, כן נשמע אליך, רק יהיה אדוני אלוהיך עמך, כאשר היה עם משה. We are willing to sign a dotted line. We are willing to complete every action or every command that you tell us, as long as you're managing to keep on the legacy of Moshe. And the way that we can check that out, if you're keeping the legacy or not, is God with you like he was with Moshe? So we have a litmus test to see, are you managing to live up to this legacy? Yes, we'll be with you. No, we'll drop you like a hot potato. So not only God is telling Moshe, they're telling Yeshua, look, Moshe died, any brera, I have to give the leadership to you. The people are saying that to Yoshua as well. And I just spent 20 minutes of bashing Yehoshua.
But he's dependent on listening to the son of Aaron, isn't he? Whereas Moses was not dependent on Aaron.
I mean, also that's true. The next generation is everybody. Also in the Kohanim, it's the next generation, and not just in Yoshua. So what I spent for 20 minutes now is saying that a person reading Chumash, which is emphasis about Moshe Rabbeinu, by the very definition has to give second fiddle to Yoshua. And in that respect, Sefer Yoshua continues that vein and saying, Yoshua, second fiddle. And I want to make...
Excuse me, Rabbi Slotnik, can I ask a question? I'm so sorry. I'm traveling, so I'm having a hard time connecting with you, so I hope you hear me.
Yes, I hear you.
So wouldn't this... Thank you. First of all, love this series so much. Thank you. Toda rabah. So I have a question. Isn't this almost hyper necessary, given the fact that the people have just seen? I mean, I'm presuming it doesn't say that the Am is aware of the Va'et Hanan and the intense, so sad personal drama that Moshe has just gone through between him and God and being rejected and not going into the land. And so isn't it almost imperative for this whole, what is it, reconnecting, reaffirming of Moshe as leader, as leader, as leader? Otherwise, how could Yehoshua assume a mantle? Otherwise, we could say, is it an impaired mantle? Look, God didn't give him his most cherished desire to go into the land. Could the people have assumed otherwise that God didn't or wasn't with Moshe. So I see this as almost hyper necessary for Moshe to be front and center here, especially even in God's assessment and saying to Joshua, look, don't think that you're now leapfrogging over Moshe Rabbeinu's head because I didn't let him in. He's still king of the world, and you are still the Sagan Nasi. Do you see it that way at all?
Okay, so what Sandra is saying is that it's almost in order to protect Moshe's legacy, we need to do this. We need to say no one can touch Moshe, or no one can reach his level, or else we'll lose the entire Torah. And therefore, the second generation, by definition, has to be a lower level. That's what Sandra is saying. I mean, I totally agree. And
Right.
What I'm saying now, although I'm using the word bashing Yoshua, what Sandra is saying, it's almost necessary, and I agree. And in fact, the first line of Sefer Yoshua is to do exactly that. In order for the transition from the Torah to Nevi'im to be a smooth one, we need, in a sense, to say the Torah is up here and we're going downwards into the world of Nevi'im. I totally agree. I just want to quote one Gemara in Masechet Baba Batra that indeed it says that. It says, Pnei Moshe kepnei Chama, v'pnei Yoshua kepnei Levana, or sorry, I should say, the elders of the generation said, the face of Moshe is like the face of the sun, and the face of Yoshua is like the face of the moon, obviously much smaller, less bright. But then they add, Oy le'ota busha. How embarrassed should we all be? Look what happened to our generation. This is what happened to our leaders. But recognizing, like Sandra did, is that there is definitely a decline. So that's what I've done for the first 20 minutes of my shiur here. But what I want to do now is saying that, not canceling what I said, but at the side of what I'm saying, two other things are happening. Two other things are happening where the Torah and Sefer Yoshua are saying, Rega, be'emet, is there no room for a leadership that is similar to the leadership of Moshe? Recognizing that we will pay a price, but in certain respects, we have examples where Moshe is recognized as the leader, and Yoshua is recognized as another the leader. I want to bring you some of those examples as well. If you switch it towards the end of the section, look in section F, the very end of the Torah. Mamash, the last few psukim of the Torah. ויבכו בני ישראל את משה בערבות מואב 30 יום, ויתמו ימי בכי אבל משה. Okay, the people of Israel, Moshe passes away. The people of Israel mourn him for 30 days. Rashi brings the Midrash, comparing this mourning to the mourning about Aaron dying. I won't go into that. ויהושע בן נון מלא רוח חוכמה, כי שמח משה את ידיו עליו, וישמעו אליו בני ישראל, ויעשו כאשר ציווה אדוני את משה. ולא קם נביא עוד בישראל כמשה, אשר ידעו אדוני פנים אל פנים. לכל האותות והמופתים אשר שלחו אדוני לעשות בארץ מצרים לפרעה ולכל עבדיו ולכל ארצו. Now, these psukim are extremely sad. Also, interesting question, who writes them, which Gemara and Baba Batra discusses. But you understand, Pasuk Chet is the mourning. Pasuk Yud is a description of Moshe. Pasuk Chet, we're mourning Moshe dying. Pasuk Yud, we're describing Moshe. There is no great prophet like Moshe that God spoke to him face to face. And all the miracles that God has done, Beretz Mitzrayim, the Paro, Lechol Avadav, Lechol Arzo, and all the mighty hand and all the great terror which Moses brought in sight of all Israel. Now, Psukim Yud, Yud Aleph, and Yud Bet are a description of Moshe. So Pasuk Chet is the death of Moshe, and Pasuk Yud, Yud Aleph, and Yud Bet are a description of Moshe. And smack in the middle, we have Pasuk Tet saying, and Joshua is full of the spirit of wisdom because Moshe has laid his hands, and that's why people of Israel are listening to him like God commanded Moshe. Now, why is this pasuk here? Now, this pasuk actually has, it's surprising twice. It's surprising, first of all, because it's a pasuk talking about Yoshua in the middle of psukim talking about Moshe. But it's more than that. It's the opening of the pasuk is almost contradictory to the rest of the pasuk. V'Yoshua bin Nun maleh ruach chokhmah. Ki samach Moshe et yadav alav. וישמעו אליו בני ישראל, ויעשו, כאשר ציווה אדוני את משה. The pasuk has two things to tell us about Yoshua and two explanations of them. The two things the pasuk tells us about Yoshua is Yoshua is extremely wise. He's full of the spirit of the wisdom. And the second thing the pasuk tells us about Yoshua is that the people of Israel listen to Yoshua. Children of Israel hearkened onto him. Those two facts are about Yehoshua. And just if we just look at these two facts on their own, we're comparing Moshe and Yoshua, and Yoshua bin Nun is maleh ruach chokhmah, but Moshe is a really great prophet. So it's not a pasuk saying Moshe is a great prophet and Yoshua is a lesser prophet. That's not what it's saying. Moshe is great, Yoshua is great. And these psukim are trying to build up Yoshua. If I the whole time spoke about psukim that are building down Yehoshua, lowering him, bashing him down, saying he's a servant, this is a pasuk that is putting him on equal footing with Moshe, equal but different. Moshe is the best prophet, and Yoshua is filled with the spirit of the wisdom. Well, is Moshe wise? Presumably, but the Torah doesn't describe him in terms of wisdom. So it's almost choosing to tell us two different attributes of Moshe and different attributes of Yeshua, but in a sense, building them both up. And it's doing it at the very, very end of the Torah. So if I spoke in the beginning of this year about the Torah ending with the death of Moshe, I wasn't exactly accurate. The Torah ends with the death of Moshe and the buildup of the greatness of Moshe and the buildup of the greatness of Yehoshua. And simultaneously, the Torah speaks about two leaders that are exceptional. And no longer now can we just say, oh, the role of Yehoshua is simply the Mesharet Moshe. Now, indeed, the Torah does tell us, and that's the second thing that happened in this Pasuk Tet, is why is Yoshua filled with the spirit of wisdom? Because Moshe gave it to him. And why do the people of Israel listen to him? Because that's what God told Moshe will happen. So it links it back to Moshe, but it's not that Yoshua is now the sidekick of Moshe forever. Yoshua was built up as a new leader, similar to Moshe, by Moshe. But he's not, so it's not, he is replacing Moshe, but he's not replacing Moshe as Moses be. He's replacing Moshe as Yoshua. And Yoshua has the ability to place Moshe. Why? Because Moshe chose him. Moshe put his hands on him. Moshe instilled him with the Spirit. But at the end of the day, Yoshua now is an independent leader of the people. And he's not necessarily only leading the people because of what Moshe did or because of what Moshe told him. Rather, we hear a parallel vision. Now, I'm saying this, I'm not canceling out my first 20 minutes. The first 20 minutes are there. And the beginning of Sefer Yoshua indeed is telling Yoshua time and again, you are Eved, the real slave of Moshe, of God is Moshe, and you are the second fiddle. But I want to point out that there's a very persistent another tune happening here where Yoshua is his own person. And I want to show you a few places that this happens. Look in section G, bringing you back to the beginning of Sefer Dvarim, where Moshe Rabbeinu tells the people of Israel he's not going into Eretz Yisrael. Gam bi hitanaf Adonai bigdalchem lemor. Gam ata Moshe will not lo tavo sham. You will not go into Israel. Yoshua bin Nun haomed lefanecha hu yavo shama. Oto chazek. Ki hu yanchil Eretz Yisrael. Now, if you remember the beginning of Sefer Yoshua, when we heard so many times the name Moshe while talking to Yoshua, here God is speaking to Moshe, and listen to how many times he's mentioning Yoshua in this one pasuk, pasuk lamed chet. Yoshua bin Nun, haomed lefanecha, hu yavo shama, oto chazek, hu yanchilenu et Yisrael. Yoshua in one pasuk is mentioned 5 times, because God is saying, you're not going in, he is going in. It's not that you're not going in, but your sidekick is going in. You're not going in, Yoshua is going in. He is the one going in. He's the one chosen. And again, it says later on in Parashat V'etchanan, which Sandra quoted before, look in Pasuk 28, Tzav et Yoshua v'chazkel v'amtzeu, hu ya'avor lifnei ha'am hazeh, hu yanchil otam et ha'aretz asher tireh. You're looking over the land from Har Nevo. He will go in front of the people and bring them into Eretz Yisrael. So we do have a very, very persistent, I mean, as you see, the page goes on, and I just don't have enough time to go through everything. I'll bring one more example from the Torah, and I want to go back to Sefer Yoshua. When at the end of Parashat Ha'azinu, God tells Moshe to write the song of Ha'azinu and to teach it to Bnei Israel. Look in Pasuk of Bet. Pasuk Yutet, God commands Moshe, ואתה כתבו לכם את השירה הזאת, ולמדה את בני ישראל, שימה בפיהם, למען תהיה לי השירה הזאת לעד בבני ישראל, teach the people of Israel שירת האזינו. That's a command that God tells Moshe, and indeed, we hear Moshe completing this command in Pasuk of Bet. ויכתוב משה את השירה הזאת, ביום ההוא וילמדה את בני ישראל. פסוק כ"ג, ויצב את יהושע בן נון ויאמר חזק ואמץ, כי אתה תביא את בני ישראל אל הארץ אשר נשבעתי להם, ואנוכי אהיה עמך. Here we have a command, a discussion between God and Yoshua. Not God to Moshe to tell Yoshua, like we've seen previously. God directly speaking to Yoshua, and he says, Chazak ve'ematz, like we hear in the beginning of Sefer Yoshua, כי אתה תביא את בני ישראל אל הארץ אשר נשבעתי להם, ואנוכי אהיה עמך. Now these words are very, very similar to what Moshe Rabbeinu himself heard, and here in the Torah itself, and I believe it's the only time in Torah we find this, God is speaking in the Torah to Yoshua. And he's not speaking to him through Moshe, he's speaking directly, and he says, you will bring the people of Israel to the land, I have spoken to them. Toward them, Anochi yeh imach, I will be with you. Now, we hear this again in the beginning of Sefer Yoshua, but here we have it without the background sounds of, oh, my slave is really Moshe, he died, you take over. A direct statement, God speaks to Moshe, I will be with you. As to Yoshua, it's already so natural for me to say this. So we hear here in the Torah itself, and then there are 2 or 3 other examples that we hear Yoshua as being an independent person. And I want to show you some of these examples also in the chapter that we just read now. I'm taking you to Pasuk Vav, Pasuk 6. חזק ואמץ, כי אתה תנחיל את העם הזה, את הארץ אשר נשבעתי לאבותם לתת להם, which is almost verbatim what I just read from the end of פרשת האזינו. רק חזק ואמץ מאוד, לשמור לעשות ככל התורה אשר ציווך משה עבדי, אל תסור ממנו ימין ושמאל, למען תשכיל בכל אשר תלך. So here the idea is the same idea. You need to be strong and resolute to observe faithfully the Torah, the teachings that Moshe taught you. Like we hear in Sefer Dvarim, do not steer from it right or left. But here there's a change. Leman taskil b'chol asher telech, so that you may be successful. Now the translation here is successful. I'm not sure, especially because of Pasuk 8. לא ימוש ספר התורה הזה מפיך, והגית בו יומם ולילה, למען תשמור לעשות ככל הכתוב בו, כי אז תצליח את דרכך, ואז תשכיל. These two psukim add a new conversation that we haven't really heard. I mean, any yeshiva bacher will tell you that the mitzvah of Talmud Torah is v'agita bo yomam v'layla. Like every yeshiva bacher knows that. You have to learn Torah day and night. That actually doesn't say it in the Torah. Nowhere in the Torah does it say that you have to learn it yomam v'layla. I mean, it does say you have to do it before you go to bed, when you wake up in the morning, b'shok becha v'kumecha, lechtecha b'derech, shivtecha b'veidecha. It says, but the concept of learn the Torah all the time, למען תשמור לעשות ככל הכתוב בו, you need to learn Torah in order to continuously observe it. This is a chidush that we hear by Yoshua. To the extent that Chazal actually mentioned this, the beautiful midrash in Masechet Megillah, where later on in Sefer Yoshua, there's a meeting that Yoshua has with an angel, and the meeting with the angel is it's a good question why it exists, but Chazal interpret the meeting to say that the angel comes to rebuke Yoshua for not learning Torah, or more specifically, for not learning Torah in the place of battle. You're about to conquer the land of Israel. How is it that when you have 5 minutes, you're not learning? You need to combine learning and worship, as political that sounds nowadays. The idea that Yoshua is linked to Limud Torah is a beautiful midrash in Masechet Megillah, but it's also pshat here. God tells Yoshua the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu's era ended means that you're now second fiddle, correct? But it also means that there's something that you can do that Moshe could never have done. And that's learn Torah. Because you now have the Torah. Moshe created the Torah. Moshe was in the evolvement of the Torah. You now have the complete book. You now have a new responsibility, which is to learn Torah. V'agita bo yomam v'layla. Now, this is because this is the new attribute. You can no longer view Yoshua as a person that is only working from the power of Moshe, because here he's commanded to do something that Moshe never had. And in fact, in Sefer Yoshua itself, we have a few times that you have ways that Yoshua is similar to Moshe, but not from the power of Moshe. Like the terminology, Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe lemor, that we hear hundreds of times in the Torah. Twice in Sefer Yoshua it says, Vaydaber Hashem el Yoshua lemor. Ideas that Moshe never had, and they're formulated in a similar vein to the words that Moshe Rabbeinu received. But Yoshua is receiving them. But the truth is that in the larger picture, Sefer Yoshua is not really anything Moshe could have done, because Sefer Yoshua is about the land of Israel. And Moshe Rabbeinu simply did not come in. So Yoshua has a new type of leadership, not because he's only an independent person, but because he has realms that he has to operate within that Moshe Rabbeinu just never did. Conquering the land of Israel, dividing the land of Israel. So although Moshe Rabbeinu did have that to a certain extent with Bnei Gad, Bnei Reuven, Chatzi Shevet Menashe, and conquering the eastern side of the Jordan. But Sefer Yoshua, the entire book is about a topic which is conquering the land and dividing the land. And here the question and here the question of is Moshe and Yoshua, are they similar leaders or not similar leaders? Who's more powerful? Who's more is almost an irrelevant question because they're not aiming to do the same things. The role of Moshe is A, and the role of Moshe Yoshua is B. How can you even compare them if they're not trying to do the same thing? So, in a sense, what I did in the past 55 minutes is ask a question and then tell you why it's an irrelevant question.
Rabbi.
Well, one second. Let me just finish my last thought.
Surely.
Indeed, if you compare Moshe and Yoshua, Yoshua is a sidekick, and indeed, is Yoshua the obvious choice? Probably not. And that's why he needs to be totally built up. Chazak ve'ematz, chazak ve'ematz, chazak ve'ematz.
That's what I was going to get
together with telling him that you're only, Moshe is Eved Hashem and you're only his servant. That is true. However, and the however is very, very important. First of all, although there's a lot of chazak ve'ematz going on here, there's also some of the actions we hear about Yoshua being parallel to Moshe and not just being subservient to Moshe. And the last thing I said is that it's also totally natural because at the end of the day, the goals that Yoshua has to conquer and achieve are totally different than the goals Moshe needs. So therefore, you cannot really speak about them in the same realm of leadership. So while we're doing the transition between Torah and Nevi'im, the Torah really speaks in that language, like Sandra mentioned before, that Chazak ve'ematz and Moshe Eved Hashem, etc., in order to ease us into the book of Yoshua. But once we're in the book of Yoshua, the conversation is so different that you really have a hard time looking back. And I want to end with one last thing, and then I have a couple of minutes for questions. The very end of Sefer Yoshua, the very last chapter of Sefer Yoshua, we hear Yoshua passes away, and I'll read it to you. Well, actually, I'll show it to you. Here we go. In Pasuk Kaftet, it says, ויהי אחרי הדברים האלה, וימות יהושע בן נון, עבד אדוני, בן 110 שנים. ויקברו אותו בגבול נחלתו בתמנת סרח אשר בהר אפרים, מצפון להר געש. Three things are unbelievable here. First of all, Yoshua is Eved Adonai. If the beginning of the book, Eved Adonai היה Moshe. At the end of Sefer Yoshua, Yoshua גם הוא Eved Adonai. Are they identical? No. But each one has its own type of being Eved Hashem. Moshe Rabbeinu is Eved Hashem, Noten Torah, and Yoshua bin Nun, who Eved Hashem, Manchil Eretz Yisrael.
Each had their own tafkid.
Nachon. Second thing is, you hear that Yoshua is less than Moshe. Moshe lived 120 years. Yoshua lived 110 years. But the third thing is Moshe Rabbeinu, he's buried and no one knows where. He's not buried in Eretz Yisrael, and no one knows where he's buried. Yoshua, ויקברו אותו בגבול נחלתו בתמנת סרח אשר בהר אפרים. There's a great exact location, but what's unbelievable is that it's in his own nachala, and it's his own piece of Eretz Yisrael, which is something that Yoshua achieved and Moshe Rabbeinu couldn't. Yes, and we have about 3 minutes for questions.
Yes, Rabbi.
Yes.
One of the things, though, that we might be able to infer here is that Yoshua's leadership qualities were not as great as Moshe's, because is it 3 times that is stated Chazak ve'ematz to Yoshua, as if he is weak, as if he needs to be strengthened up?
It says it 3 times in the first chapter, but it says
in the first chapter. That's right.
Yeah, 100%. You need
Chazak. Whereas in Moshe's case, if I recall correctly, was at the Battle of Yericho, his arms had to be held up, but once his arms were held up, the Bnei Israel were victorious. He couldn't let his arms down, though. And was it Yoshua that held up one arm? I don't know which one.
No. Yeshua was actually fighting Amalek in the valley.
Amalek, okay.
It was Mun
So
and
it
Fu.
seems that at the outset, at least, Yoshua needs to be propped up because he is not strong. His character seems to be lesser than that of Moshe.
100%, and that's what I spent the first part of the year. Clearly, that's a strong vein. The strong vein of is Yoshua is the lesser leader, and he needs to be strong, put up. You're right, 100%. All I was adding is that although that is true, there's also similarities and not just discrepancies.
Mhm.
And I see there are some chats here, so people do not easily adhere and follow Moshe. Was it right for them to be?
So it's been pointed out that there was no rebellion ever against Yoshua, but there was one against Moshe.
More than one, correct. I mean, Yoshua brought them into the land. With Yoshua, there's more like slight disagreements, but definitely no rebellion to the extent that we have with Moshe, both by the Chet HaEgel and Chet HaMeraglim and Korah and Mei Meriva. I mean, time and again, Moshe's leadership is called into question. And you're right, with Yoshua, he's more accepted by the people immediately.
Also, I don't think that we can discount the fact that Yeshua was a man of war. He was a general. I don't know that the people would have approached him in a rebellious state quite as cavalierly as they might have Moshe. I think there was a different complexion to the whole thing.
But you have the army on your side. You're.
I mean it, right? If he can defeat.
Rabbi,
I don't think I'm going to go and start to complain to him. So,
hello.
Yes, Aaron, comment.
Yes, hi, Rabbi. This was a wonderful shiur, and
Thank
I
you.
made a few comments in the chat. So thank you for all your wonderful insights. But when I stand back, if what happened to Moshe and Yehoshua hadn't have happened, we wouldn't be cycling back to Bereshit again.
Yes.
Not everything is fixed. So
Right.
next week or in a couple of days, again, we begin to turn, to look again.
Yep, and the truth is that's one of the reasons why some commentaries say why the Torah ended with the death of Moshe, and now we're getting to Eretz Yisrael because it wanted to leave the story a little bit open-ended, so we can go back again and refix it and reread it and rethink about it and evaluate. But let's see.
Was Yehoshua perhaps the person who was Magia, the last Pesukim of the Torah, because it says Vahagita.
Okay, מעניין. Vahagita bo yomam v'layla. What you're referring to is there's a machlok in Baba Batra about the last Pesukim of the Torah. Who wrote them? Because it said Moshe wrote them. Moshe died. How can Moshe write around his own death? So there's actually a dispute. One opinion is that the last 8 Pesukim were written by Yehoshua. So what you're suggesting is that Moshe Yoshua's Hagita, he's editor, not just the one who continuously studies.
And I think that if anybody thinks that Yehoshua is going to have an easy ride, let's just look back at how Moshe took so much flack or punishment from a group of people who are the people who really gave him a hard time. They were not patient, they were not this, and Moshe took the flack for all of it. So we shall see.
You're 100% correct, but you should also remember that the very last chapter of Yoshua, he recreates a new covenant, brit between Kadosh Baruch Hu and Am Yisrael based on history and not so much about Sachar v'Onesh like Moshe Rabbeinu does, but rather creates a different covenant, which we emphasize on Leil Seder, but that's a conversation for another time.
And it's a new generation as well.
We will end here. Everybody have a Ma'adim L'Simcha. B'ezrat Hashem, there'll be good news today or tomorrow with the hostages. and we can all have a באמת חג
אמן.
לכולם.
יש כוח.
Amen,
תודה.
amen. Merci,
Amen.
Shem.
Thank you.